The Carter family had finally found what they thought was a forever home, a quiet, aging farmhouse tucked away on the outskirts of Vermont. It was the kind of place people dream of retiring to: wide open fields, towering pines that whisper with the wind, and the creaking charm of wood floors and stone fireplaces. Mark and Sarah Carter were thrilled to give their children, 7-year-old Emily and 10-year-old Jake, a life closer to nature. Their golden retriever, Max, seemed just as thrilled, exploring the land and lying contentedly on the porch. But that peace shattered just 3 days in. It began in the dead of night. At precisely 3 a.m., Max would suddenly stir, leave his bed without a sound, and sit rigid at the base of the staircase. Then he would start to howl. Not like a dog wanting to go out, but a low, eerie, sorrowful cry that echoed through the halls and sent chills up their spines. His eyes never moved from the top of the stairs. It was as though he saw something no one else could. They tried to calm him. Mark even took him outside one night, thinking it was an animal in the yard. But Max refused to leave the stairway. Nothing stopped the howling until exactly 3:17 a.m. Then, as if a switch flipped, he would go silent and lie back down. At first, they thought it was just stress from the move. But each night, the same thing happened. 3 a.m. sharp, 17 minutes of howling, always focused on the same shadow corner of the staircase landing. And slowly, the family began to fear that Max was seeing something they weren't meant to see. At first, the Carters tried to brush it off. Moving into a new house, especially one as old and creaky as a farmhouse, could stir up all sorts of strange behavior in pets. Maybe Max was just unsettled. Maybe it was the scent of old wood or the unfamiliar layout. "He'll adjust," Sarah reassured the kids, though her own nerves were beginning to fray from the nightly howls. But as days turned into weeks, the pattern never broke. Every night, exactly at 3 a.m., Max would rise from his sleep, pace briefly, then sit at the bottom of the stairs and release that same mournful howl, eyes locked on the top step, ears pinned back, fur bristling ever so slightly. The children, once excited about their new home, were now visibly tired and afraid. Jake began asking to sleep with the lights on. Emily, only 7, started having nightmares and waking up crying. One morning, she clung to Sarah's nightgown and whispered she was there again, the woman in black, standing at the top of the stairs watching Max. Her voice was soft, trembling, eyes wide with confusion and fear. Sarah froze. Mark, determined to get to the bottom of it, installed motion sensor cameras in the hallway and living room. He even started sleeping on the couch, hoping to witness whatever Max saw. But each night played out the same. Max would sit and howl, unwavering, his gaze locked on empty air. And the footage showed nothing unusual, just their dog, howling at a space that should have been empty but felt anything but. The following morning, the Carter family gathered around Mark's laptop in the kitchen, bleary-eyed but determined. He had stayed up to monitor the cameras, but saw nothing with his own eyes. Now, reviewing the recorded footage felt like their last hope for answers. The clip began at 2:59 a.m. Max stirred from his bed and padded across the wooden floor. He didn't bark or whine, just paced nervously before settling at the foot of the stairs. Then, at exactly 3 a.m., his head tilted upward and the now familiar howl began, low and mournful, echoing softly through the audio feed. But at 3:08 a.m., something caught their attention. A flicker, brief but undeniable. The hallway light, positioned directly above the top stair, glowed faintly on camera. It pulsed with a weak, yellow hue for exactly 8 seconds, then went completely dark again. The problem? That bulb had been dead for weeks. Sarah had tried replacing it when they first moved in, but it wouldn't work. Even Mark, who knew his way around wiring, couldn't get it to turn on. They had simply left it and planned to fix it later. Now, watching the glow on screen, all 4 of them sat in stunned silence. No one had flipped a switch. There had been no sound of footsteps or movement. Yet the dead bulb had glowed, not brightly, but just enough to illuminate the top stair, right where Max was staring. The timestamp matched Emily's nightmares exactly. Whatever was happening in their home wasn't random. It was precise, timed, intentional, and it was beginning to feel intelligent. One chilly morning, while tidying the hallway, Sarah stopped cold in her tracks. Her eyes had caught something unusual. Deep, narrow scratch marks running vertically down the basement door, for distinct lines, clawed in perfect parallel, as though something with sharp nails had dragged down the wood again and again. She knelt for a closer look. The edges of the marks were splintered and raw, still flaky with fresh wood dust. These weren't old damages from a previous owner. They were new, but what troubled her more was their height. Whatever made them had been standing upright. Max stood a few feet away, growling under his breath. His ears were back, body tense, eyes fixed on the basement door. He wouldn't come any closer. The Carter family had never opened the basement since moving in. The light down there didn't work, and they hadn't had time to sort through the old storage. Max had always avoided that side of the house, even as a curious dog. Now, he was visibly trembling. Against every instinct telling her not to, Sarah slowly reached for the doorknob. It was ice cold. Her hand hesitated, then turned it. The hinges let out a long, eerie groan as the door creaked open. Instantly, a blast of cold air surged out, rushing past her face like a whisper from underground. It was unnatural, not just the temperature, but the feel of it. Heavy, old. Still, Max let out a yelp and bolted up the stairs, claws skidding on the wood as he disappeared into Emily's room. Sarah stood frozen at the threshold, staring into the pitch-black descent below. Something wasn't right. The basement wasn't just dark. It felt occupied. Deeply unsettled by the basement discovery and Max's terrified behavior, Mark decided he needed answers beyond what cameras or reason could provide. He took a trip to the town's modest library, tucked between a hardware store and a diner on Main Street. The building smelled of old paper and dust, comforting once, but now foreboding. With help from the elderly librarian, he dug through property records and archived newspapers, scanning for any mention of the farmhouse's history. What he uncovered sent a chill down his spine. In 1974, the property had belonged to a woman named Lydia Marlowe, a widow with no children. Lydia was known in the community as strange, reclusive, and deeply superstitious. Locals whispered that she practiced dark rituals, brewed strange tinctures, and spoke of spirits roaming freely after midnight. Children dared each other to sneak near her home, but no one ever got close. Then, one stormy night in October, Lydia vanished. The newspapers gave a sanitized version, missing under unusual circumstances, but Mark found an old journal entry from a local historian tucked in a file. It revealed more. A group of townsfolk had gone to confront her, believing she was performing rituals that brought sickness and misfortune. But when they arrived, the house was empty. No sign of struggle. Just one bizarre detail. The front door was wide open and the fire in the hearth still burned. Her body was never found. Many believe Lydia had performed one final ritual, sealing herself within the house to preserve her spirit and curse any who dared disturb her. One detail in the journal stood out, underlined twice. The last time anyone saw her alive was exactly 3:00 a.m. Mark closed the file slowly, heart pounding. That was the exact time Max began howling. Every night. Later that night, after dinner, and an uneasy quiet had settled over the house, Emily approached her mother with a folded piece of paper clutched in both hands. "I drew something," she said softly, eyes wide and serious. Sarah unfolded the page slowly and felt her stomach drop. The drawing, done in crayon and pencil, was haunting. A tall woman stood beside the staircase, her face pale and expressionless, eyes hollow black voids. Her long dress billowed downward like smoke, her hands dangling limply at her sides. Long black hair flowed unnaturally behind her, almost as if moving on its own. Behind her, the stairs were drawn with jagged, uneven lines. And in the corner, a tiny figure, Max, sat, howling upward. "She watches Max," Emily said in a whisper, as though afraid the woman might hear. "She's sad and really angry. She wants something, but I don't know what." Sarah knelt, trying to keep her voice calm. "Who is she, sweetie?" Emily shrugged. "I don't know. She just comes at night. Sometimes she's crying. Sometimes she just stares." Sarah stared at the drawing, shaken to her core. No one had mentioned the name Lydia to Emily, They had kept the historical findings between the adults, thinking it too frightening. But the resemblance between the crayon figure and Lydia Marlowe's portrait, seen by Sarah just hours earlier in a library photo, was uncanny. The hollow eyes, the black dress, the hair like smoke. It was as if Emily had seen her. Terrified and out of options, the Carters reached out to a local spiritualist named Brother Malcolm, a quiet man in his late 60s known for his deep understanding of the paranormal. He had dealt with hauntings, possessions, and unsettled spirits all across Vermont. When he arrived, he walked to the farmhouse silently, pausing by the staircase and basement door. "Something old lingers here," he said softly, bound, angry, and waiting. That night, the family gathered in the living room while Brother Malcolm set up a circle of protection with candles, salt, and burning sage. He murmured prayers in a language none of them understood, his voice deep and steady. Max sat at the edge of the circle, trembling but refusing to leave. As the clock neared 3 a.m., the atmosphere in the room thickened. The air grew cold. The flames of the candles began to flicker violently. Max let out the loudest, most mournful howl yet, so raw and desperate it brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Suddenly, the lights throughout the house began to flash, surging and dimming rhythmically, like a pulse. Then it happened. A shadow moved down the staircase. Not a trick of light, but a solid, dark figure captured clearly on the living room camera. It glided down slowly, silently, before dissolving into the floor. A piercing scream echoed through the house. Not human, not animal, but something ancient and lost. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the lights stopped flickering. The air lightened. Max collapsed in a heap, panting and exhausted, but calm. The house was still. For the first time in weeks, the silence was comforting. Something had left, or finally been let go. In the days that followed Brother Malcolm's cleansing, a strange peace settled over the farmhouse. Max, once haunted and restless, slept through the nights without stirring. His howls were gone, replaced by soft snores and the occasional twitch of a dreaming paw. The energy in the house had shifted. It no longer felt heavy or tense. The corners no longer felt like they watched. For the first time since moving in, the Carter family breathed easy. Emily no longer drew the woman in black. Her nightmares vanished, replaced by bright, colorful sketches of flowers and dogs. The staircase returned to just being stairs, not a stage for the unseen. They sealed the basement permanently, bolting the door shut and plastering over the edges. No one wanted to tempt fate again. But months later, while cleaning out a corner of the living room to install new shelves, Sarah lifted a warped floorboard and discovered a small wooden box nestled beneath, dust-covered and wrapped in decaying cloth. It seemed untouched for decades. Inside was a tarnished silver locket, a brittle, faded journal filled with symbols and sorrowful entries, and a letter addressed in delicate script. Asterisk, to whoever finds this, free me or join me. Asterisk, there was no hesitation. That evening, the family took the box deep into the woods behind their home. Together, they dug a small grave beneath an old pine and buried it with quiet prayers and trembling hands. As they covered it with soil, the wind blew gently, almost gratefully through the trees. Whatever Lydia Marlowe had bound at that hour, whatever haunted the house at 3 a.m., was finally released, and the Carter family, at last, was free